All right, guys. Very good morning, very good evening, everyone. Right. Quickly get started. Uh, as we planned, we'll be conducting two demo sessions for today and tomorrow, and I'll go over about course structure, course timing, course duration, and the course payment method. And post that, we'll continue with the regular classes for the registered student. So you might have already seen this Google Drive document here. These are the two demo sessions, 6th November and 7th November. That will be Thursday and Friday in IST time zone. So that we have 2 hours, 8:30 to 10:30. In EST, it will be 5th November and 6th November, Wednesday and Thursday. That will be late night for them, 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. EST, 2 hours. Uh, Couple of things here. These are the demo sessions widely available, open for everyone. Anyone can join and they can clarify if they have any questions or queries, or they can just stand by. Post that, uh, once our actual classes will start on 20th November, Thursday. That will be 19th November, Wednesday in EST time zone. So that will be of 3 hours, 2 days in a week. The classes will be conducted 2 days in a week, Thursday and Friday, and that will be of 3 hours each day. So it will be totally 6 hours in a week. So we should be able to complete in 7 weeks. That's your actual class duration and class start date and time. And so this RAC course is a paid training. The course fees will be 15,000. That's 185 US dollar. Will be conducted over a Zoom session, the live online classes, and we'll be covering 19C version. Right, this is about the course duration, course timing, and the fee structure, and when we are going to start this actual course. And this about a demo sessions, and this is the demo link what we're using it for next 2 days. Once after demo, once we start with our actual classes, will be of separate Zoom link, and all those registered students will be part of a separate dedicated WhatsApp group. Right, so now I can quickly open this course curriculum. What all included in this particular RAC course? So you can go over this course curriculum link here. So again, it's the same as what we did for database course last 2 weeks back, what we started. So we'll start with the introduction to the clusterware. And okay, before I go with this RAC course curriculum, let's go back here. What are the minimum requirements? Let's talk about minimum requirement first, so that we'll continue with the RAC course curriculum. The minimum requirement, the candidate or the student who will join this RAC course, they should have a minimum knowledge on Linux, Windows, and basics of SQLs. And on top of that, you should know basics of database, or you should be already working as a Oracle DBA. Because without knowing database knowledge or fundamental of database, RAC will be very, very difficult. Because RAC is an advanced course on top of database course. So you should be already aware of database, what is database architecture, instance, all the background processes, how select queries works. Once you are aware of all those fundamentals, then you can enroll for this database RAC course. Without knowing the database fundamental basics, RAC is, you know, French and Greek. You cannot able to understand or catch up what I'm saying or what I'm articulating, the concept about rack and cluster and grid. So you'll not be able to catch up and you'll not be able to understand anything. So knowing these fundamentals is very, very must or mandatory requirement. And on top of that, you should be having a proper hardware with you, your own laptop or desktop with a minimum 20 GB RAM and 150 GB SSD hard disk. So there are many questions or many students ping me from last 1 week. I have only 8 GB RAM. I have only 16 GB RAM. Can I able to set up a lab? No. You should have minimum 20 GB RAM. Then only you will be able to set up your rack. If you don't have a 20 GB RAM or minimum 150 GB SSD hard disk, you will not be able to set up your rack. Even though if you try to set up with a 16 GB RAM or without SSD hard disk, your VMs or the labs will get crash. And again, you end up with recreating one more time and again it's gonna getting crashed. So why we need this hardware or the laptop with this configuration? Because we are setting up lab on your own laptop or desktop using Oracle Virtual Box. Right, this is a minimum requirement. Everyone should have this one. Then only you should be able to set up your lab. Right now, if that is clear, let's go back to RAC course curriculum. So I'm gonna talk about a multiple sections for today and tomorrow. The very first thing we'll start about the introduction about the instructor or about me because I'll be the one who will be taking this entire course. And then the second one, the course curriculum. I'm going to brief that course curriculum in a minute now. And the third one is the course duration and timings and fees. So that's how what I just covered here. So this is your course duration, course timing, and when this actual course is going to start. If I put down here so that I can share this note. And I'll just put this down here. So we already covered this one, course duration. It's a 7 weeks and 2 days in a week, Thursday, Friday, and 3 hours each day. And the timing is 8:30 a.m. IST to 11:30 a.m. IST. That will be 11 p.m. EST to 2 a.m. EST, late night for EST hours. And our actual course is going to start on 20th November. Right, that's about the course durations. And again, coming back to instructor is we don't have any other third person coming and delivering this course. It's absolutely delivered by me. I hope you all aware about me and I repeatedly told multiple times about my experience and my areas of expertise and which all major activities are performed. So I'm not going to spend more time on that because there much more information about me I already described in my YouTube channel. In just two liners, if I want to describe about me, I worked in this IT industry more than 15 years, and all these 15 years I worked for various Oracle products, Oracle DBA, RAC, Exadata, Golden Gate, Oracle Cloud, and Oracle Supercluster, Oracle EBS, Oracle PeopleSoft, Soha, and many, many more product. And also I worked on many other technologies like other than Oracle, SAP and IBM DB2 and PostgreSQL, MySQL, MongoDB, and many other databases. And also other technologies I worked on informatics and some other DevOps tools, Python scripting, Terraform, cookbooks, Jenkins, shell scripting, and those are like other areas of expertise. So I'm the one who will be delivering this entire RAC course end to end, and then this course curriculum and course timing and the fee structure. And now jump on to this course curriculum. We'll go and then understand each and every concept what will be delivered in this course, so that if there is any particular topic is missed in this course, feel free to ping me, or you can comment me in the chat, or you can call me. I can take those and then I can include in my further topics. Right. Let's jump on to that course curriculum. So what are the topics we cover here? We'll start with the clusterware introduction. What exactly mean by clusterware? What is grid? What is ASM? What is clusterware? How this clusterware is formed? And what's the difference between your standalone versus rack? And what are the advantages of rack? Why rack? Why customer will prefer to go with rack rather than the standalone? And almost 99% enterprise customer, all their workload, production workload will run on rack. Rack stands for real application cluster. And then what are the networking comes or networking included in the rack? Everything will be covered here. Networking, the moment I say networking, there are hundreds of IPs here in rack cluster. We have a public IPs, private IPs, scan IPs, VIPs, and management IPs. And then how many IPs are needed and what are mandatory IPs, and how many IPs we can have it for rack and scan and VIPs. So all will be covered at the starting of this clusterware understanding. And then we'll start with the clusterware architecture. The clusterware architecture, how exactly this cluster is formed, how this cluster communication is works, how these cluster services will talk to each other, and what is my cluster startup sequence. And one of the common entry questions, can you brief me about cluster startup sequence? How my cluster startup sequence works? So we'll talk about this cluster architecture, including networking and OCR, OLR, routing disk, and how this cluster startup sequence works, and what are the dependencies. So the moment I say cluster startup sequence, that itself is the one of the complex topic, and that itself will divide into multiple interview questions. My HAS service is not starting, how we will troubleshoot and what's the reason? My OCR service is not starting, what's the reason? How we will troubleshoot? Right. So in the cluster startup sequence itself, we have so many services, so many resources, so many daemons, so many cluster services. We'll try and then understand end to end. The moment if I want to talk about this cluster startup sequence, this one single slide is more than enough here. Right? Where is that slide? Okay, this slide. These all are your cluster startup services or the cluster startup sequence. We have level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And my HAS is not starting. What is the reason? What's the root cause? My CRST is not starting. What's the root cause? And my CSST is not starting. What's the root cause? And then each of these name has its own unique roles and responsibilities. CSSD stands for Cluster Synchronization Service Daemon. CRSD stands for Cluster Ready Service. And likewise, we have many services, GNS, SFS, and your ONS, EONS. So all of them. So we'll go in deep and then understand end to end on each of the service and what's the dependencies. And in the interview also, you may get individual service and it's ask what it will do, and if it's not starting, what you're going to check, where is the log, and how will troubleshoot. So we'll try to understand those startup sequence architecture here in the second chapter, and then we'll start with the actual setup. We'll first set up our Linux with all the pre-configurations, and then post that we'll set up all the IP addresses, public IP addresses, private IP addresses, scan VIP addresses, and management IP addresses. And then we'll create a shared disk, and then we'll partition them. On top of that, we'll create ASM disks, and then we'll set up all the DNS configuration, forward name resolution, reverse name resolution. Right, setting up of the VM and setting up of the network and shared disk will be done here in the chapter number 3 and 4. And then we'll start with our cluster installation. We'll do all the system requirements, software requirement, kernel, groups, users, directory, and then we'll verify the run Cliffy check, and then we'll create the two node rack cluster, and followed by we'll create the rack oracle home, and then we'll create the disk group, and then followed by we'll create the rack database. So to set up your rack itself with all the pre-checks, with all the cluster startup sequence, cluster architecture, and cluster services, and the networking, so that itself will going to take entire whole week. And then post that, we'll start with the, again, I just mentioned about just a high level overview here. Once we start with those each and every concept, that itself internally has so many other related topics. We'll be keep covering all of them, but it's not restricted to what I mentioned just in this course curriculum here. There'll be a lot of other topics will be related to those. Each concept will be covered along with the when we start with the actual explanation or actual course. So once that cluster setup is done, then we'll start with the understanding of ASM architecture, ASM disk group, ASM storage, ASM mirroring, ASM striping, and ASM instance administration, ASM storage administration, adding a disk group, creating a new disk, creating a new disk, and then adding into the disk group, expanding your ASM storage or ASM disk group. And if your ASM disk group is full, what you will do? And if your ASM disks are unhealthy, poor performance, what you'll do? If your disk is dropped, what you'll do? We'll understand end to end on ASM architecture, and then ASM disk group administration, disk administration, and then ASM disk group level data rebalancing, and then how to tune that rebalancing, which includes a lot of parameters, ASM power limit and ASM cache, and then so many ASM instance level parameters where you can increase and decrease to make your rebalancing faster, to take care of your adding a disk or dropping a disk. So all will cover here in this ASM chapter, and then followed by your clusterware and rack database administration. The moment we say rack database administration, your CRS-CTL versus SRU-CTL. When we use CRS-CTL, when we use SRU-CTL, who can run this CRS-CTL, who can run this SRU-CTL? Is a grid user or Oracle user or root user who can run this one, and when to use this command, where to use this command. Restarting of your cluster services, restarting of your databases, restarting of your cluster nodes, and restarting of your database instances or restarting of your entire database. And then followed by your cluster administration, OLR, voting disk, and OCR, and cluster local registry, cluster registry, your VIP, scan IP, public IP. So that's all about cluster level. Along with the cluster administration and database administration, we'll take a look on this all the cluster administration and what all files we're going to back it up. Your OLR, voting disk, and OCR, and then followed by your database administration, RAC database administration, RAC specific parameters, SP file and P file in RAC, and the password file in RAC, and redo logs and control files in RAC, and table spaces and the data files, your system, sysocs, undo, user, temp, all those data files in RAC, how you're going to manage and administrate in specific to RAC database. We'll follow that one. And at the high level, if you talk about RAC, so if I, in a simple term, if I want to design or if I want to define RAC cluster, it's a combination or grouping of your server where your database instance will be running on the top. Database instance 1, database instance 2 will be running on the top, and below that database instance, your ASM instance 1, ASM instance 2 will be running. And below that ASM instance, you will be having your CRS, cluster ready service. You will be having your CRS. And then below that CRS, at OS level, you'll be having your HAS. So that is your actual hierarchy. And then this database instance and this database instance are part of your ASM disk groups. Here your actual database will be resides. So this entire combination you can think of it's a RAC, real application cluster. So two nodes and two database instance, two ASM instance, and the cluster services on both the nodes, and both the cluster services running on HAS located locally on that node. And those database instances are reside under shared storage, where those storage are mapped to both the servers. So then how this visualize and how this communication works, and there will be a lot of communication happens between both the nodes. You have a cache fusion, we call it as a cache fusion. The instance between both the database instances, the communication will happen and the data transfer will happen. And there are many concept comes across this. When the moment we talk about this communication, you have your the private network, you have a cache fusion, you have a split brain syndrome, you have a CSSD, cluster synchronization service daemon, and you have a network heartbeat, you have a disk heartbeat, and you have voting disk will come into picture. So how we can visualize internally, that's all like rack internal concept. At higher level, whatever I just explained, it looks so simple. But when you go internal to the rack cluster, that internal rack cluster is a very, very challenging one. So there, all these terminologies will come into picture. CSSD, cluster synchronization service daemon, your network heartbeat, disk heartbeat, and your voting disk, and your split brain syndrome. What is split brain syndrome and when it occurs? And then same way, like you have a HAIP, high redundant IP, and then private network, and then the cache fusion. How all this communication will work and how this rack internal concept will work, all will be covered over there. And also we'll be covering a lot of concept same around rack internals, which includes your why scan IP, why VIP, why public IP, why private IP, right? What's the advantages of that, and how the failure will happens, how this rack services will work. So all will be covered along with rack internals. And at the same time, we'll talk about these listeners and the backups. When it comes to listeners, there are many listeners in rack. You have your ASM listener, you have ASM net listener, and you have local listener, you have a scan listener, you have a remote listener, you have database listener. So there are so many listeners. Why these many listeners? How the connection flow will work? Which listener to which listener? Is my database registered with a grid listener or scan listener or local listener or database listener or remote listener? So very challenging and tricky to understand all the listener concept. If the user is facing connection issue, we need to understand where it is failing, on which listener it is failing. Is it failing at scan level? Is it failing at your database level? Is it failing at your ASM listener level? First, you need to understand where the flow will go. If the user enters username and password, is that connection will go to directly my database listener or local listener? Is that connection will go to my scan listener or remote listener? Is my connection will go to my ASM listener? If you are understand fundamentals of how this connection flow works, then you should be able to troubleshoot easily by looking at proper appropriate logs and other stuff. You can able to see it. And then most of all, why these many listeners? That's a fundamental fact you need to understand. So will be covered in depth under that listener concept and all these listeners and how this connection works. Right, and then The backup and recovery. So again, you might be already worked when you're working as a DBA. You might have already used RMAN, backup, restore, recovery for standalone database. So where we'll extend backup and recovery scenario and concept to my RAC database. Way to take a backup on RAC node 1, RAC node 2, or both the nodes. How to take my RAC database backup. What all files we are backing up, and our RMAN level 0, level 1, arcalog backup, control file backup, SP file backup, auto backup. And then once you have a proper incremental and full backups, how you perform the restore and recoveries, RMAN duplicate, RMAN clone, RMAN restore recovery, right? And then the other recovery scenarios, the point in time restore and recovery. And other recovery scenarios, if I lose my control file, how can I restore in case of RAC? If I lose my SP file, how can I restore in case of RAC? If my system data file is corrupted, my sysog data file is corrupted, my undo data file is corrupted in case of RAC, how I can recover these files individually? My control file is corrupted or lost, how can I recover it? In case of if I have multiplexing of control file or without multiplexing of control file, if the control file corrupted, how can I restore it? My redo logs are corrupted, how can I restore them? So all we'll explore in this backup and recovery scenarios and concept, and that too specific to RAC. And then followed by multi-tenant architecture. Again, I might have explained multiple times repeatedly about this multi-tenant architecture. The very must and very mandatory for all the DBAs. Why multi-tenant architecture is very must and mandatory? Because as of 19C, earlier, let's say you talk about 7i, 8i, 9i, your 10G, and 11G. So these all versions, Oracle has a normal database architecture. In 12C, Oracle has introduced new architecture. Along with this normal database architecture, Oracle has introduced this multi-tenant database architecture. Multi-tenant database architecture is just like enhanced version of your normal database architecture. So if you are creating a database in 12C, or creating a database in 18C, or creating a database in 19C, Oracle has given an option whether you want to create your database normal database or multi-tenant database. Normal database or multi-tenant database. In these three versions, 12C, 18C, 19C, you can choose while creation of database what kind of a database you want. Normal database or multi-tenant database. But whereas going with a 21C, this is only multi-tenant database architecture. No more normal database architecture. And go with any next further version, 23C or 23AI or 26 AI. So these are like advanced version 23, 23 AI, 26 AI. This is all about multi-tenant database architecture, no more normal database architecture. So as a DBA, learning this multi-tenant architecture and understanding is very, very must and mandatory thing, because the future focus or future databases are all about multi-tenant database, CDBs and PDBs. We'll talk about complete end-to-end understanding of multi-tenant architecture, how it works, and how it is different than the normal database architecture. Why Oracle is focusing on this multi-tenant database, and what are the CDBs and PDBs, container database and pluggable database. How to install, configure, and clone your CDBs and PDBs. How to create a RAC database with the CDBs and PDBs. How to manage and administrate or maintain your CDBs and PDBs, how that local user and common user works in CDBs and PDBs, how you can or end user can connect to my CDBs or PDBs, how the listeners will work in CDBs and PDBs, how my backup and restore will work on these CDBs and PDBs. Again, the moment we talk about CDBs and PDBs, all this listener will concept comes into picture. At the moment we talk about CDBs and PDBs, all these backups and restore will come into picture. How can we handle this backups and restore and recovery across my CDBs? And again, your local, if you're doing a export and import, your export and import will differ when it comes to CDBs and PDBs. How you're going to deal with that? We'll talk more end to end about this multi-tenant architecture. and followed by ACFS. ACFS stands for your ASM cluster file system. How to configure, how to administrate, how to manage that ACFS, how to mount, unmount, maintain, increase that ACFS. Again, ACFS is a very useful concept to avoid your NFS dependency, avoid your storage dependency. Rather than asking your storage admin to mount NFS mount point on these rack nodes for my day-to-day activities or for my scripting or my automation, you can create your own ASM cluster file system and you can mount it across your rack cluster node and you can use it for your day-to-day activities, export, import, your automation, scripting, day-to-day keeping the log files, the script files. You can create by your own. You act as like your storage admin. You no need to depend your storage admin anymore. That we'll talk more in our regular classes about ACFS and RAC database versus RAC one node. So this is again I might have told multiple times when it comes to type of database. So we have this standalone database and we have this RAC database. In this standalone database, we have with ASM or without ASM. Your database is running under local file system, your database running under your ASM file system, where we call it as a restart service, Oracle restart. So in case of RAC, again we have this RAC database and we have this RAC one node database. So we'll be talking about RAC one node and what are the advantages. The licensing is one of the advantages. So if I draw that one RAC one node here, let's say I have four node RAC database here. It's a four node RAC cluster. In that RAC four node RAC cluster, let's say you have ASM1, ASM2, ASM3, and ASM4. It's a four ASM instance will be running, and on top of that, you will be running your database instances, instance 3 and instance 4. All the four RAC instances will be running. This is your RAC database. So at the same time, you can configure your RAC one node database, meaning you can have your test underscore one. Your RAC database will be having this nomenclature 1, 2, 3, 4. And your RAC one node will be having this underscore 1, test underscore 2, test underscore 3. That's a standard naming convention. Test underscore 4. This is your RAC one node. Right. So the moment it is RAC one node, only one instance will be up and running on any one of this RAC node. So test underscore one instance will be up and running here. Remaining all three instances will be down. In case of this instance goes down here or this server goes down here, any one of this test underscore 2 or test underscore 3 or test underscore 4, any one will be up and running. At any given point of time in rack one node, only one of the instance will be up and running. So one advantage for rack one node is licensing cost. Rack one node has a lesser license compared to rack. So for any reporting databases or any non-critical databases, you can run this rack one node. So we'll talk about the rack one node, how to configure, how to create, and how to relocate. And then followed by your patching. Very important. Patching is one of the very fundamental topic, or the DBA will be dealing with this patching every quarterly. As Oracle releases every quarterly patches, so four times in a year they will release patches in Jan, April, and then July, and then October. So recently Oracle has released this October patch. So four time patches the Oracle will releases. So the moment I say patches, there are many naming convention in Oracle patches. You may see PSU, CPU, bundle patch, one-off patch, merge patch, interim patch, hard patch, overlay patch, diagnostic patch, superset of patch. So there are so many numbers or so many names they are given. But for a DBA, it doesn't matter whatever the patch it is. We are just applying that patch on my grid home or my Oracle home. So we have this OPatch versus OPatch Auto, the tool for the patching. We use OPatch, OPatch Auto, and data patch. So data patch is here. This O patch and O patch auto is applying that patch under your grid home and DB home. There's a patch, I need to apply that patch at binary level on my grid home and Oracle home. Either I can go with O patch or O patch auto. O patch is the manual, O patch auto is automation. A lot of steps are automated over there. That is a tool. I can use that those tools for patching my Oracle home and grid home. And data patch is my other tool where to patch my database, I can use this data patch. So we'll patch my clusterware or the grid home, we'll patch my Oracle home and all the databases. How to minimize the downtime for the patching? So there is the rolling patching, non-rolling patching, out of place patching, and how to minimize the downtime for patching. And when it comes to patching, there are a lot of other stuff we need to understand. What is central inventory? What is local inventory? How these inventories are impact my patching. My patching is running longer time. How to troubleshoot that? Where are my patches are stored? Once I apply the patch, where they will be stored? What is inactive patch and active patch in my cluster or in my database or my grid? Will all come into picture here when it comes to patching. So we will deal about in case of rack, rolling, non-rolling, hybrid patching, and all those will explore in this patching concept here. And followed by upgradation. How can I upgrade my rack database? What is the difference in upgrading rack database compared to your standalone database? Again, one of the common interview questions, my upgrade is taking more time. What might be the reason? And my I need to upgrade two databases. One is 1 terabyte, other one is 10 terabyte. How to estimate the time? Is both the 1 terabyte and 10 terabyte database upgrade will take same time? Or if 1 terabyte database upgrade takes 1 hour, 10 terabyte database upgrade may take 10 hours? Right? Fundamental questions. In interview, they will make you get confused yourself. 1 terabyte, I need to upgrade two databases, 1 terabyte and 10 terabyte. And 1 terabyte upgrade has taken 1 hour. So does that mean 10 terabyte database upgrade will take 10 hours? No, answer is no. So your 1 terabyte and 10 terabyte, both the database upgrade will take same time. Maybe few buffer minutes here and there, but will be taking the same time because even database is 10 terabyte, 1 terabyte. Those are all your application data. We are not worrying about application data. Your database upgradation, we are doing upgrade of my core fundamental system level objects, the synonyms, views, or the base tables, whatever belongs to sys system, which are available on system data file and sys data file, will be updating those files. And it will not be like 1 terabyte database upgrade will take 1 hour, 10 terabyte database upgrade will take 10 hours. Not like that. 1 terabyte upgrade may take 1 hour, 10 terabyte database upgrade may take 1 hour, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, here and there, few buffer minutes, but not that drastic changes. But obviously, there is some factors why your upgrade is taking longer time. There are a lot of invalid object in your database. There are a lot of recyclable object. Your registry components are invalid. Your sys user database components are invalid. Maybe other major factors which will impact your upgrade timing. And there are other tuning parameter to handle this upgrade timing. You have to do a gather stats and the fixed object and dictionary object before you do your database upgrade, and make sure that you have sufficient space on your FRA so that your upgrade will go fine. So all those concepts will come into picture. And again, on top of that, what are the different methods of your upgrade? You have command line method, you have GUI method, you have auto upgrade, you have Perl script, shell script, you have silent method upgrade. Which one is the best options? All those options will be demonstrated and explored in this upgrade concept. And that is specific to RAC database here. And then there are other concept, node addition. Right now it's a 2 node rack cluster. I need to make it to 3 node rack cluster, 4 node rack cluster. How we're going to add the node? And it's a 4 node rack cluster. I want to remove one of the nodes, make it to 3 node rack cluster. How can I remove that node? Right. And at the same time, I want to convert my standalone single instance database to rack database. How can I do that? You can use the DBCA or manual command line. You can use OEM or you can use rconfig, many other tools. Right, so those will be covered. So that is pretty much what we are planning to cover. Once you are able to understand each and every concept of this one, you should be able to support and work any client as a rack expert. Right, on top of that, as usual, we'll be having some other extra topics where we will be covering resume writing and cover letter. I'll go over my own resume and cover letter. I'll prepare those. I'll show all those high level steps, what is needed, and how you can make it stronger, your resume. And followed by your interview questions and answers. We already have many questions, interview questions are written and uploaded in a Google Drive. And each and every topic what we cover, along with that, we'll be regularly touch basing what are the expected questions and answers. And then at the end of the course also, you can review and overview that all the questions which are placed in one single document. And those are running document will be keep updating those document with the new questions and answers. And post that we'll be conducting a mock interview. Again, this is subjected to your interest. If you're interested, you can register for that mock interview where we will where I will connect with you one to one and then I'll be driving this interview. So you will feel like it's a real time interview you are attending for any client. And with this mock interview, I'll be checking how much you prepared and what are the areas you need to improve. Again, not a mandatory thing, but it's subjected to your interest. If you're interested, you need to register for that. Right, makes sense. So I'm gonna pause here for a minute. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask, or if any of the topics are not included or missed, you can feel free to post it over here. I can take those questions. Any questions, guys, so far? All good? All right. I'll take it as a no. Again, there are other questions I got from last 2 to 3 weeks. Many students are pinging me and then told, uh, can you include some performance tuning, rack related performance tuning, or the tuning parameters? No, obviously, we'll not be covering anything on the performance tuning. Performance tuning itself is a separate course. We are talking or we're concentrating only the cluster administration and the maintenance and management, how we're gonna deal with that. So anything related to performance tuning and all those things, it should be a separate course. Right. So that's about three topics or three concepts what I wanted to cover. Introduction about me, course curriculum, and the course duration and the course timing and the fee structure. And few other topics I wanted to cover. One is uh, the Google Drive access. Very interesting one. I'm not sure. This is the my way of educating or assisting all the students about the Google Drive access. What is that meaning Google Drive access? So I'll be providing access on the four Google Drive links. Google Drive link 1, 2, 3, 4. All the course materials like PPT, lab exercise, workbook, all the PDFs, whatever I'm referring in this course, everything will be placed under this link one. With all the ready labs, we have already set up a two-node rack and a two-node rack with database, without database, and all those labs will be available. You just need to download and configure in your laptop, and then you can use those labs. And then link to all the software tools, entry questions, automation script. So all will be placed under this link too. You can use them. And interesting other two links are the previous batch recording. Whatever the RAC course we conducted previous batch, all the recordings will be available over here. You can go and then watch all the recording in advance and you prepare by yourself and you can attend the live classes. And also live recording, whatever the live classes will be conducted daily, right? Like Thursday and Friday. So those also recorded and uploaded into that Google Drive. And so that you can watch the recording whenever you want it. And again, these Google Drive access is lifetime accessing material. And even you can download locally into your laptop, no restriction on that. So if I can quickly show this links, I can get my link one here, Google Drive link one for the RAC specific one. Right, this is my link one, what I was referring here. All the RAC course materials, we have various documents, all the lab exercise, PPTs, workbook, everything will be placed over here. And more than that, what is interesting here, we have this ready labs, ready VM for RAC. If we open that one, and you have so many labs, we have this Oracle Lab 1, Lab 2, Lab 3. These are a brand new VMs. Nothing is there. And if you take a look on these labs here, we have a RAC 12C setup, ASM and Oracle. You can use this 12C rack setup and you can do a navigation, your cluster upgradation practice. You can upgrade from 12C to 19C. And we have this 19C rack setup, ASM installed with a grid user. So in the market or in some customer environment, you see rack is running with a grid user, database running with Oracle user. You can navigate that one. And we have this 19C rack setup. ASM and database both are configured in this rack here. Database grid is ASM is running with the grid, database running with Oracle user. These are your ready lab. You just need to download and add it to your virtual box. And then we have this 19C rack setup, ASM and database running with Oracle user. It's a general purpose. So we prefer to go with Oracle user for both the database and the ASM or cluster so that it will be easy for you to practice and maintain. So there are many labs which are readily available. You can use them for practice. And also on top of that, other notes, PPTs, workbook, everything will be located over here. That's about your Google Drive link one. You'll be getting access, and even you can just download it, whatever you want it. Just no restriction. It's all your own documents, and just download it and you can use it. And then at the same time, the link two is for all the software tools, interview questions, and other stuff. So if I get my link to here, let's add it over here. Okay, link two is like other tools, the Oracle softwares and patches, monitoring and automation script. I'll be keep adding the automation scripting, so you can just use it for your day-to-day operations. And interview questions all will be available on this link too. And other two links are your previous batch recording and then current batch recordings. So which is very, very interesting one, right? Like you have your all the previous batch recordings and you can just go and then watch, explore and on your own. If I open this one here, right? This is your previous batch recording. If you say day one, day two, day three. So along with the recordings, you have this notepad. So whatever command I'll be executing in my lab, all those commands will be, all the output will be uploaded here. When you're watching the recordings here, you can just refer that notepad and then you can practice it on your own. Even you can download it locally into laptop, no restriction on that. Right? That is your previous batch recording. So anyone preparing for the interview or you already experienced in RAC and you want to complete this course within a week because you're preparing for some interview, you can take a look on this previous batch recording. Or you can watch this recording in advance before attending the live classes so that you can have a lot of questions and queries. You can ask them during the live classes. And that's the advantage of this Google Drive. And then the next concept I wanted to cover, the WhatsApp group. So WhatsApp group is for registered student. So all the students who are registered, I'll be adding him to separate WhatsApp group, which is dedicatedly for those batch. And any questions, queries, all will be discussed in this WhatsApp group. And not only related to this course, even if you are attending some interview or you are already working and you need some assistance, you can always post it in our WhatsApp group so that it will be benefited to everyone. And then I'll be connecting with you and I'll be assisting with you for any questions and queries. Right, and then other topic I wanted to talk about the payment method. So since I just mentioned course curriculum, duration, timing, and fee structure, this is the RAC course, which is paid training of 15K Indian INR or 185 US dollar. So anyone interested, feel free to ping me on my WhatsApp or my cell number. I'll be assisting you further on the payment processing. Right, and then also we talked about the prerequisites, which is very important. In order to do this lab setup, you need to have this prerequisites or minimum requirement. The understanding of basics, Linux and Windows and SQLs, and then the database knowledge is must. And then the hardware lab setup is must, so that we can have a proper lab setup and you can do a hands-on exercise. If you don't have a labs, and you'll not be able to do hands-on exercise. Give me 1 second here. All right, sorry for that. Okay. So that is about prerequisites. And just again, I'll recap it. What all we covered so far. We started with the introduction, the course curriculum understanding, the introduction meaning who is your instructor, that's the me, and the course curriculum, what all the content in this course curriculum. I'm going to ping this course curriculum link in the chat here. You can take a look. And then we just talked about the course duration, timing, fee structure. And then when we will be starting this actual course, that'll be 20th November. And then what you'll be getting after registration once you made a payment and register for this course, you'll be getting access on this Google Drive. And what are the importance of Google Drive we just covered. And then you'll be added to WhatsApp group. All the communication we will use it in this WhatsApp group. Again, who are interested on this course, you can feel free to ping me on my WhatsApp number. I'll assist you with the payment processing, what are the methods and all. I'll guide you one to one. Give me 1 more second, guys. All right, so that's about the payment, and then we just talked about this minimum requirement. So basics of your Linux, Windows, SQLs, and basics of DBA. That's a must. If you're not completed your database course, don't register for this RAC course, because without knowing database knowledge, RAC will you'll not be able to catch up the things. You'll not be able to understand anything. So first register for database course and complete your fundamentals, and then go for this RAC course. And there is many students ping me last 1 or 2 weeks saying that I don't have a laptop or desktop. Still, I'm attending for interview. Can I still go and then enroll for this RAC course? I don't have my laptop with 20 GB RAM. I have only 8 GB RAM, 16 GB RAM. Can I register for this RAC course? So even if you register with this RAC course, it is all your interest, but you will not be able to do a hands-on lab exercise, because we need a minimum 20 GB RAM to set up your VMs, the rack cluster. Without that, you'll not be able to do a lab setup. If you're not able to do a lab setup, then you'll not be able to do any hands-on lab exercise. Whatever the lab exercise I'm doing it, you'll be able to watch them, but you'll not be able to do a hands-on. So I strongly recommend everyone as a DBA, until unless you put your hands and do your own lab exercise, you will not be able to understand. You will be able to understand the concept when I'm explaining it, but you will not be able to get into that one. You will not be able to get hold of that particular concept until unless you put your hands and practice by your own on your lab. Once you do a practice by your own in the lab, then that concept will be forever. That will be, you will be remembering that concept forever. And without doing a lab hands-on exercise, whatever the concept I am explaining, you will be able to get that concept. You'll be able to understand that, but you will be able to easily forget. You'll forget that concept within a week or so. But other than that, if you put your hands and do that concept live in your lab, that concept you will never forget. So that's why practicing is in the lab is very very important. But still you are attending for some interview and you're looking for a job change and you are okay for now. I want to register this course and listen whatever the topic I'm covering just for the interview purpose or cracking the interview. And later, once I get a new job and role, later I'll be practicing it. If you're wanted to take that risk or you're okay with that, you can go and then still register for this RAC course without you performing the lab. And that's the other advantages, right? Like you will be attending for the interview and you want to crack that interview. So if that is the case, you can go for this. You can go and register for this RAC course. All right. So again, one few more other concept what I want to cover. What's the best laptop I can buy in order to do that? So you can go with the a minimum 32 GB RAM or 64 GB RAM. If you are willing to or planning to buy, you can look for 32 minimum 32 GB RAM or minimum 64 GB RAM laptop, Dell or Lenovo or whatever. With minimum, let's go with 250 GB minimum to 1 TB. Go with either minimum 250 GB SSD or 500 GB SSD or 1 TB SSD. Go for that. That's more than enough for your lab setup, including your database labs, including your rack labs. You can able to do it. And the CPUs, go for anything between 2 to 4 CPUs. And your processor, so anything your latest i9, i10 or i11, whatever the latest processing Intel, you can go with latest processing or latest processor. So then other concept. So this is your minimum purchase. If you're planning for the new laptop, go for this minimum configuration. And other fundamentals for this course is based upon Linux and 19C. So no Windows. We'll not be doing this anything on the Windows. We'll not be doing a Windows based rack installation. No, it's on Linux based. So the installation will be installation of this rack on Mac. This is based upon Windows. So this installation based on, if I put them here, based on this rack, right? Like I just mentioned, this rack installation based on Windows OS. So if you are using Mac, then those ready labs will not work here. Whatever this ready VMs we have it here, these VMs will not work. So if you're using a Mac, then again you have to look for your Windows. So I don't have a ready labs for the Mac. You have to install your own virtualization and you have to set up your own VMs. Once you're able to set up your own VM on Mac, so then the installation remains same. Whatever I'm covering, the steps will be remain same. But whatever I'm teaching will be based upon Windows OS. Right. Then other question, who can attend this course, this RAC course? The any DBA prior knowledge with 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, doesn't matter. You can able to attend this course. Right. Then quickly, I'll take a pause here for a minute. Any questions so far on this point number 1, 2, 3, introduction about your instructor or course curriculum or course timing and fee structure or the Google Drive link, right? WhatsApp group or the payment process or the prerequisites.
Sir, myself Ishwar.
Hey, yeah, sure.
Yeah, hi sir. Sir, is it necessary for CPUs for 2 to 4? Otherwise, one CPU is enough for rack environment, setup environment.
We don't need a CPU first of all for the VM setup. The CPU depend upon your performance, right? If you have a CPU more than one, then your laptop will be much more faster. And if your laptop is faster, and your VMs will be faster.
Okay.
Right. So I think if I open one of my laptop here, whatever the laptop here, I have it. Let's see. If I go here, I'll just get here, and if I show more properties, okay, here is this. So what this laptop, what I'm using here, take a look, or else if I just get only this. Mm, there are many other 32 GB, 64 GB. Okay, take a look here. Your 13th generation. So that's a processor, latest one. And i9, 32 GB. And then a 500 GB SSD hard disk. So with this kind of a laptop, you can run your VMs, rack, and your uh, whatever, like you are running multiple VMs, all will go fine without any. If you go with this like 32 GB RAM minimum, you will minimum get around 4 CPUs or the 2 CPUs, not one. So if you are planning for, go for this configuration, and then the CPU will be of a 4 or 8. So that will be a very very super fast computer or the laptop, so that you can practice your both the database course and RAC course without any hiccups. All right. So that is about your Google Drive link access, the importance, WhatsApp group, and the payment method. Again, feel free to ping me or call me on my cell. I'll assist you further. And what are the prerequisites? You can take a look. And then finally, two more topics. One is like certifications, and other one is the few concept. We'll talk about that. The few concept we'll talk about that rack architecture. Tomorrow we'll continue. Today we'll just talk about that the fundamental of rack architecture. Tomorrow we'll continue further with the rack networking file system and the ASM. Tomorrow we'll continue with these other topics. But now I'll talk about little bit on certifications and then the rack architecture part. The moment I say certificate, uh, we need to have two minimum certificates. One is a DBA certificate. If you are like 1 to 4 years of experience, you have to first complete these database certificates. And if you are anything above 4 years, complete this RAC certificate. These are your fundamental certificate for any client or you are working for any client, let's think of in a market you are working for any client, the client running their production database or development or test any database is either running under standalone or is running under rack. Standalone is your database, rack is your clustering of clustering of servers. So if you are a junior DBA, then you have to complete this database certificate, and if you are a senior DBA, you have to complete this rack certificate. Let's say I have 10 years of experience, the rack certificate is must. Let's say I have 2 years of experience, then database certifications are must. Rack you can look for after 4 or 5 years. What is this database certifications? That's your OCP certificate. 19C OCP certificate. You have to complete this 19C admin 1, 19C admin 2. That's the exam number 1Z082, 1Z083. That will cost you around 20,000. So this database certificate, OCP certificate is must for junior DBS. For the rack, you have to complete this rack certificate. 19C rack and ASM certificate. The exam code is 1Z00078. Again, that will cost you 20,000 Indian rupees. So anything I mentioned, right? Any client, let's take anything. Let's take Infosys, Oracle, Wipro, or Walmart and Flipkart or any client, whatever their Oracle database, either they will run with the standalone database, that's the database certificate you have to complete, whether those database runs under rack, you have to complete this rack certificate. Meaning you are a junior DBA or senior DBA. If you are junior DBA, you have to complete your database certificate. If you are senior DBA, you have to complete your rack certificate. Right, on top of this two fundamental certificate, there are many other certificate. Like you're working as a Exadata admin. You can complete Exadata certificate. Working on EBS, OBI, Golden Gate, OEM, Supercluster. These are your specialization. These are called fundamental certificate, database, and rack. On top of that, these are your specialization certificate. Based upon your areas of interest, you want to expand your specialization skills in Exadata, EBS, OBI, Golden Gate, Supercluster, PeopleSoft, many other areas, right? You have to go for certification in those areas later part of the course. And if you're interested in cloud technologies like OCI, AWS, Azure, GCP, go for those certificates. Those are your specialization certificate in those areas. But as a DBA, if you are sharing that your resume to any openings or any HR, these certificates are must. They look for this certificate first. OCA, OCP, or RAC certificate. On top of that, if any specialization certificate, they look for this. But as a fundamental, you should have this certificate. Let's say there is a question asked by many students. Sir, I'm applying for many positions in the market and I'm not getting any interview call because your resume is weak. Your resume is not competent. Why your resume is weak or not competent? Because you have not done any certificate and you have not mentioned any certificate in your resume. Because in the market for a single job opportunity, there will be hundreds of resumes, thousands of resumes. So your resume has to stand out of all those thousands of resumes. That'll come into picture only if you have the certifications. Because any HR or talent team, they take a look on your resume, they will just take a look whether you have any certifications. The moment you mention Oracle these certifications or the certification logos, then your resume will be shortlisted. It will be getting a highest priority. Right? That's the importance of that. Right? And then there are a few other questions I regularly get a ping from my students or my colleagues. Is the cloud technology making impact on DBA role? Or the answer is no. With the help of these cloud technologies, there are few jobs are automated. Like say, we used to struggle for database creation, setting up of kernel parameters, setting up of users, groups, and then create a database. So with the cloud technology, just one single click, database as a service, your database is ready. So other than these few jobs, whatever DBA used to do, those all become automated with help of these cloud technologies. But other than that, whatever your database administration, maintenance, management, and your day-to-day activities, user creation, permissions, privileges, and backup, restore, recovery, and performance tuning, it all remains same. Whether your database is running under on-premises, whether your database is running under cloud, the DBA job remains as it is, right? And then we no need to worry about cloud technology booming and DBA roles are getting impacted. No. And the other most common questions what I get is AI and ChatGPT, Gen AI, agentic AI, all these technologies making impact on DBA role? No, those will not replace DBA role. What we need to do, we need to make sure that use those technologies and then you can improve your day-to-day activities. Right? So those are like helping. These are kind of a helper to a DBAs. Rather than we spending hours of time to do maintenance or to do a administration or do a day-to-day health check for my database, use this AI agent, agentic AI, Gen AI, ChatGPT, and then complete your day-to-day activities. Other than spending 2 to 3 hours every day using these AI agents or ChatGPT, you can write your own script and then complete your task within 5 to 10 minutes. Those are kind of helping to DBAs. There, those are not for replacing the DBAs. And the other questions I get is DevOps. Is DevOps is must for DBA? A DBA need to learn all these DevOps technologies. This is not the must thing. As a DBA, you no need to learn these DevOps things because they have many other technologies inside DevOps. Cookbooks, Jenkins, Terraform, Ansible, and so many other concepts. CI, CDs, cloud, and other stuff. So, but is it necessary to learn all of them? No, it's not a must thing. DBA should learn DevOps, but there are few concepts within the DevOps where DBA can learn, which will give you added advantages. For example, Python scripting you can learn, Shell scripting you can learn, and Ansible you can learn, Terraform you can learn, and Kubernetes you can learn. If you learn those few concepts in the DevOps, you can use those concepts in your day-to-day activities. For example, if you learn Ansible, which is part of your DevOps, with help of that Ansible, you can do your patching automation. You can do thousands of servers or thousands of database patching using Ansible within one single click. Right? That's the advantages of your DevOps. Learning concept of DevOps is added advantage for DBAs. And then there is a other questions I used to get. Which cloud technologies is good for DBAs? So if you are willing to stay focused on this Oracle world itself, Oracle technology itself, let's go for OCI, Oracle Cloud, where you have both the standalone rack, all those supported. And if you are looking for some diversification and you want some other technologies, then go for AWS or Azure. But learning this cloud technology, any one of the technologies must. As a DBA, if you learn, it will be added advantage and you will be your resume will be in the top list in the market. Once you learn any cloud technology, let's say I learned OCI, you can easily pick up AWS and Azure. Or if you learn AWS, you can easily pick up OCI. But again, other thing to remember here, this standalone database and RAC database supported in only Oracle Cloud. In other AWS, Azure, and GCP, only Oracle standalone database is supported. RAC is not supported in any of the other cloud. Right. Then there's a other questions what I can get from my circle or within my friends or or my old students and all. I have a career gap after my college. After few years of my IT experience, I left in the middle. Can I use a fake experience? Right? So let's say I finished my college graduation. After that, I have 2 years of gap. I did not get any job opportunities. I just looking for 2 years, 3 years, and later I got the job. So can I use that 3 years or 2 years as with a fake experience later? Or I worked for first 5 years and later I I laid off. The company has laid off and I did not get a job for next 2 years or 3 years. Can I use a fake experience to cover that? So my personal suggestion is always provide a genuine reason why that 2 years of 3 years of gap. After college graduation, I did not get a job. I went for some higher education, or I went for some business, or I went for some abroad for education. I went under some medical surgery. After my 5 years of experience, I went for 2 years of career gap. That is because my medical health was not good, and I went for my family take care. I went with some other business plans. So provide a genuine justification rather than providing a fake experience, because nowadays companies are doing a thorough end-to-end background verification check, and then they will be able to identify whether there's a fake experience or real experience. Once you are identified with the fake experience, then they can immediately terminate on spot. So, but again, if you have those kind of a gap, so always try to get some reference, internal reference, meaning my brother is working in some company, my uncle is working in some company, or my close friend is working in some company, and try to get in touch with them, and then try to get an internal reference from them, and then with the internal reference you can easily able to get a job in their organization if you have this kind of a career gap. Otherwise, you can provide a genuine justification so that you'll not be into a trouble in the later part of the course. But if you use some fake experience, maybe definitely they will figure it out with the background verification, and then you will be in the risk later part. They can terminate you on spot if they identify it's a fake experience. I hope that's clear, and those are the common questions where many students or in my friend circle they used to always discuss. Just I wanted to put them here. All right, I'll take a pause here again for a minute. If anyone has any questions, queries so far, no questions, all good, all fine.
Hi, my name is Ramani. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Raman. Yeah, sorry for that.
Yeah, actually, Mallikarjuna, I have a doubt right now. Everything is moving to cloud, right? So, if any database in Oracle side, if they want to move it to cloud, is that possible? And if yes, how the process will go ahead? And if I want to learn in that concept, how I need to go ahead?
Right, so that is your migration. So your
Yeah.
database is currently running with on-premises, and
Mm-hmm.
on-premises in your local data center, you have servers and database running there, and you want to migrate your database to cloud. Any cloud, it's OCI or it's AWS or Azure. And again, there are methods for the migration. What kind of method you're going to follow? You're going to use traditional export and import, or you're going to use your RMAN backup and restore, or you can use a golden gate replication, or you can configure your stand data guard, your production running with on premises. You configure your standby database in cloud, and then you can do a replication from this on premises to cloud, and later you can do a role change, make that cloud database which is standby, make it the primary, and then make this the on premises database as a data guard or standby database, and later you can break this standby database. So
Okay.
based
Actually,
upon
my
yeah, go ahead.
uh-huh. Yeah, my main thing is that I want to be proficient in the way that Oracle to cloud migration, that too in AWS.
Yeah.
So if I want in that migration part, I want to be thorough. So how I need to go ahead after learning this rack concepts and everything. So exactly next step, what I need to do.
So migration again, it's not that straightforward. You can learn it. It's based upon your experience,
Okay.
how much project you got it. So as I mentioned, migration, you have to analyze what is the downtime and what's the impact of the business downtime. So there are many methods, export and import. That's one way where you can do. You can RMAN, backup and restore. That's other way of
So the
migration.
same concept will be work in cloud as well, in AWS as well.
Right.
Okay.
That's true. And then you can use your golden gate replication. You can configure your on-premise database and replicate your golden gate replication through your cloud. And then we can go with the other method. You can do a DG setup. Like right now, your primary is running under your on-premises. You set up your data guard in cloud and then do replication. And then on top of that, your cloud provided tools. Each cloud vendor provide their own migration tool. Oracle has its own migration tool, and your AWS and GCP they have their own migration tool. You can use those migration tool to copy the backup or to do entire database migration. And this is specific to that cloud vendor. And then other than this, if you are the complexity here is the migration same OS platform. Let's say on my local data center, my database was running under AIX and I want to migrate it to cloud in RHL or on Windows. Or my local data center, my database is running under Windows and I want to migrate it to cloud, where in cloud I'm running my RHL or AIX. So that also matters. Is it the same platform or different platform? Again, the furthermore complexity will increase.
Okay.
Right? It's not
Okay.
a straightforward anyone can handle until unless you start and exploring it, you'll
Okay.
get to know more.
And how about the rack concepts in AWS? Will these be same there also, or
No,
do
I
we
just
really
mentioned,
intend
right?
to maintain the rack there?
I just mentioned here, right? There's no concept of rack in
Okay.
AWS, Azure, or GCP. Only in Oracle Cloud, you'll get standalone database and rack database.
Okay. So why, if we are, I mean, if we are migrating the rack database to AWS, so we need to just migrate the database. It's not that need to create some more instances or anything,
No,
right?
only standalone. Yes.
Okay, got it.
All right. With that, let's quickly jump on to. I'll say, I hope for now, no questions. If anyone has any questions, again, feel free to ask me. I'm happy to answer them. If not, then I'll just quickly talk about few concepts and then we can wrap it up for today. All right. So, very first thing, let's say I want to just understand a little bit on. Before I go with this architecture, let's talk about this rack versus or standalone versus rack. Let's put it in different standalone versus rack. Why? I also mentioned that very small startup or small clients who will use this standalone, and any enterprise customer, big customer will always go with the rack. And again, before I go with this standalone versus rack, in the market, let's say before I'll go with here, Oracle versus other databases. Why Oracle is so strong in the market compared to other databases? So as for my experience, uh, let's take like other databases. I never seen any database more than, let's say, 10 terabyte or 15 TB. I never seen any other database other than Oracle. Let's say, let's think of SAP HANA, DB2, PostgreSQL, MySQL, MS SQL. I never seen any database. I'm talking about the RDBMS database, not the data warehouse and other type of databases. If it's a OLTP, online transaction banking application, I never seen any database more than maximum I seen it 10 or 12 or 15 terabyte around that in the other databases. But in Oracle, I have seen database with 250 TB or even 1 petabyte. A database of 250 TB and 1 petabyte in Oracle. So only the Oracle is a database which can handle this much of load, 100 terabyte, 200 terabyte, 1 petabyte. This kind of a heavy side database where we can see it only in Oracle RDBMS database. No other database will support this kind of a heavy workload. And that's why Oracle is one of the leader in the market. And the other than this one, like security and patching. Only Oracle will provide you more robust security in database concept other than any other database technologies. The moment we say huge database size and the moment we say security, look of any think of any enterprise customer. Let's say Walmart is one of the biggest giant all over the world, and think of their database easily it can go to 200 300 1 petabyte in size. Let's think of IKEA, one of the worldwide retail business, and their database easily can go up to 200 300 400 terabyte. And those kind of a enterprise customer will always concerned about their database size and their security. So only the Oracle is the best choice for them, and because of that Oracle is always the master compared to any other database. And once these kind of a big customer and big databases and heavy workload migrated to Oracle, and in Oracle, what kind of a database they will choose? A standalone or rack? Again, standalone is for their development or the test. Rack is for their production. Standalone is a single instance and rack is your multi-cluster. And always they will go for production workload into rack. And then why rack for their production? Because of various reasons. The very first thing for why rack, high availability, load balancing, and failover. These are the three fundamental concepts for your rack. Many customer why they will go their production workload into rack because of high availability, a load balancing, and failover. So if I can go to my diagram here, right? This is three concept if I talk here, right? So if I talk about this is your standalone, this is your rack. Very first advantages with rack is high availability. High availability meaning if one server is not available. Let's say this is my Linux. Okay, this will be 3, instance 3. Let's say this is my Linux server 1, Linux server 2, Linux server 3. If my Linux server 1 is not available, we have Linux server 2 and Linux server 3. Any client want to connect, they can connect to my Linux server 2 or 3. So one server unavailability will not impact. You have other server to receive that or help that incoming connection. That is your first fundamental concept of RAC, high availability. Load balancing. Let's say around 300 users, client 1 to client 300. 300 connections are coming for standalone. All 300s are loaded here. So the server is overloaded. The server will get crash. In case of RAC, client 1 to client 300 connections are coming. Client's connections are equally distributed here. 100, 100, or 100. The load is equally distributed. That's your scan. With help of scan has that intelligent mechanism to distribute the load, all the incoming connections evenly across all your cluster nodes. This is a 3-node rack cluster. The connections will go to all the rack cluster evenly. That's your load balancing. And there's no way server will get crash because just 100 users are connected for each cluster. Right, and then finally your failover. Failover is the other brilliant concept in rack. Let's say my client 1 connected to instance 1, client 2 connected to instance 2, my client 3 connected to instance 3, and let's say my server 1 crashed. Here my server 1 went down. Automatically client 1 who connected to instance 1 or server 1, this connection will go to either instance 2 or instance 3. That's automatically failover will happen. This client will not be aware that the server is failed and his connection is went to other nodes. We call it as a TFA, transparent application failure, meaning for the end user, for the application, they are not aware of there's a failure happens. We call it as a TFA, transparent application failure. Right? Transparent application failure. So the client will not be like, he will be doing his transaction as usual. And again, there is some restriction on that. What kind of a queries it will be failed over? Only the select queries are failed over. Other DML query like insert, update, delete. The client query, that query will fail, but he has to resubmit that query. He no need to reconnect that his session. His session will be automatically failed over. But whatever, if he doing a insert or update or delete, that query will fail, but he has to resubmit that query. But he no need to reconnect. His connection is already established to the other nodes. Right? Looking at these main features, RAC is one of the brilliant need for any production workload. Right. So that is for your Y rack. And in case of, okay, that is for your Y rack. And then other types of databases. Let's talk about other concept here. One more concept. Hope that's clear here. Y rack and what's the advantage of rack other than your standalone. Because of these three main features: high availability, load balancing, and failover. With this brilliant feature which is available in rack, and many enterprise customers, they will run their production workload into rack, and that's must thing. So again, Oracle will suggest use ma architecture. Ma architecture stands for maximum availability architecture. There's a Oracle documentation the Oracle published with the ma architecture. That's the maximum availability architecture. What Oracle suggests: prod should run on rack. That's the first thing what Oracle will say. It. Prod database should have DR setup and and that DR also should run on RAC. There are many other best practices they mentioned in this architecture. These are the two fundamental things. Your production database, let's say this is your RAC production database, this is your RAC cluster. Let's say you have ASM instance 1, ASM instance 2, and then you have prod database instance 1, prod database instance 2. This is your a prod RAC cluster, and this RAC cluster should have a DR setup, and that DR setup also should have a RAC setup. DR or standby you can call it as ASM1 and ASM2, and you have DR instance 1 and DR instance 2. So that is your actual Oracle best practices. Run your production database with the RAC cluster, run your DR or standby database with the RAC cluster, so that whenever this is the production now, this is a standby, log sweeping will happen from prod to standby. Later when you do a switchover and this become prod and this becomes standby, and the log sweeping will happen from this prod to this standby. Because of this architecture, this Oracle itself will suggest, okay, run your production workload using RAC cluster, not the standalone. Standalone, you can use it for your development, test, and UAT. Right, and then the other concept types of, hope that is clear now, what is RAC, why RAC is more important than the standalone, or what are the advantages of RAC and why RAC. And type of database. And then we covered this in our other courses, but again, I'll touch base quickly here. Okay, type of databases, we have a standalone. If you talk about in Oracle type of databases, we have standalone database and we have RAC database. The standalone database is a part of our database course where we cover the standalone. In this RAC course, we'll cover this RAC database. The standalone, we have standalone without ASM. We have standalone with ASM, where your database is running under OS file system. Where standalone with ASM, where your database is running under ASM file system, ASM storage. DB and TestDB, what we created in our database course. And Oracle recommends you run your standalone workload with ASM. Again, ASM stands for your automatic storage management. Why Oracle recommend to run your standalone database with ASM? Because high performance, read and write, mirroring, we call it as a redundancy, and then striping, splitting data and then distributing across all the nodes, and then ACFS, ASM cluster file system, and then Oracle restart. Many other advantages. Type of databases, standalone and RAC. In standalone, you can have two types again internally. One database running without ASM, one database running with ASM. And that's recommended. Why Oracle recommend run your standalone database with ASM? Because that ASM has its own advantages: high performance read and write, mirroring, striping, ACFS file system support, and Oracle restart capability, many more. Because of that factor, you have to run your own standalone database with ASM. And in case of RAC, that will be covered in this course. We have a RAC database versus RAC 1 node database. I just covered that RAC database, right? Your DevDB instance 1, DevDB 2, the database instance will be running across all the cluster nodes. Where in case of RAC 1 node, _1, _2, only one instance will be running. Why rack one node? That is maybe for licensing or maybe only that database for the reporting purpose. So those kind of databases you can run with rack one node. So again, there is a few more concept. In case of rack, in case of this rack, a rack one node, any of these database, rack or rack one node, this in case of rack database or rack one node database, you can run the database on ASM. You can run the database on file system, NFS file system. Even though it's a rack database, you can mount your NFS mount point on both the nodes and you can run your rack databases. Or you can run your database on ASM. It's a highly recommended, Oracle highly recommend you to run your rack databases with ASM. 99% customer will run with this ASM. A few customer, one or two or like hardly 1% of customer in the market where they run this rack database with the NFS as a storage, which is not recommended for production workload, but still we see in the market. I hope that's clear. Uh, rack standalone versus rack and type of databases what will be covered in this course. That's a rack and rack one node database. Right. There's a few more concept. Maybe I'll pause here for today. I'll continue tomorrow from the rack architecture, networking, rack file system. The rack file system meaning your P file, SP file, redo log files, control files, alert log files, trace file, diagnostic files, your system, sysocs, undo, user, temp, where you are going to keep it, ASM storage or local storage, whether it is a shared between the instances, and how you're going to manage those redo log files, control files, how you can add a new redo log control files. And in case of networking, your VIPs, your scan IPs, public IPs, private IPs, management IPs, how many IPs are needed to set up 2 node rack, 3 node rack, how they will communicate each other, and the rack services and rack architecture. Let me explore more in tomorrow's session. All right, guys. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up for today. Any more questions or last questions before I stop it for today? So for what we covered. Hope that's clear. Whatever I covered about course curriculum, course content, timing, fee structure, registration process, and the Google Drive link minimum requirement, and the certifications, and some general questions what we used to usually get it in our circle. Right, and then followed by few concept what we covered so far. All right, so with that, I'll take it as a no questions. Let's wrap it up for today. We'll continue further tomorrow. Let's explore few more fundamental concept on this rack architecture and networking. Then we'll reconnect tomorrow. All right, guys, let's wrap it up. Thank you.